The gunshot cracked through the Arizona afternoon, and the bullet would have torn through Henry Dalton's chest if the Apache woman hadn't pulled him sideways into the rocks with surprising strength. He hit the ground hard, dust filling his mouth and nostrils as another shot ricocheted off the boulder above their heads. His hat tumbled into the scrub brush, and he scrambled to draw his revolver, but she was already dragging him deeper into the outcropping, her movements swift and certain. She pressed a finger to his lips, her dark eyes commanding silence as the sound of hoofbeats thundered past on the trail below. Henry's heart hammered against his ribs as he counted 3 riders, maybe 4, moving fast toward Jerome Junction. He recognized the gray stallion of Cal Morrison, a cattle rustler with a price on his head across 2 territories. The woman beside him remained perfectly still, barely breathing, and Henry found himself trusting her instinct completely. They waited in the rocks for what felt like an eternity under the baking sun of 1883 Arizona territory, sweat trickling down his spine. When the dust settled and silence returned to the desert, she finally released him and sat back on her heels, studying him with those penetrating eyes. She couldn't have been more than 21 or 22, with long black hair braided down her back and dressed in traditional Apache clothing mixed with a few pieces of settler garb. A silver cross hung around her neck alongside turquoise beads. "You have enemies," she said in perfect English, her voice low and musical. Henry pushed himself up, brushing dirt from his vest. "Seems that way. How did you know they were waiting?" She pointed to the trail ahead where it curved around a massive red rock formation. The birds stopped singing. The lizards went into hiding. The land speaks if you know how to listen. He studied her face, seeing intelligence and wariness in equal measure. "You saved my life. Perhaps." She rose gracefully to her feet, moving to the edge of their shelter to scan the horizon. "Or perhaps you would have seen them yourself." "I wouldn't have." Henry retrieved his hat and dusted it against his leg. "I was thinking about getting to town before sundown, not watching for ambushes. I'm Henry Dalton. I run cattle about 15 miles west of Jerome Junction." "I know who you are." She didn't offer her own name, still watching the desert with that alert stillness that reminded him of a deer ready to bolt. "Then you have me at a disadvantage, miss." She turned finally, and something softened in her expression. "Paloma Pasqual. My mother was Apache. My father was Mexican from Sonora. Both are dead now." The simple statement carried volumes of grief, and Henry felt an unexpected pull of sympathy. "I'm sorry for your losses." Paloma shrugged, but he could see the pain she hid behind the gesture. "The world takes what it wants. We survive what remains." She moved past him, heading for a narrow path that led down the other side of the rocks. "You should not go to Jerome Junction today. Those men will be watching the roads. I have business that can't wait." Henry followed her, his boots slipping slightly on the loose stones. "I'm supposed to meet with the bank about extending my loan. If I don't show, they'll start foreclosure proceedings." Paloma paused, glancing back at him. "And if you show up dead, what good is the meeting?" He couldn't argue with that logic. "You think they'll try again? Cal Morrison does not give up easily. Someone paid him to kill you." She resumed her descent, moving with the confidence of someone who had traveled this terrain 1,000 times. "Do you know why?" Henry's mind raced through the possibilities. He'd had disputes with neighboring ranchers about water rights, turned down several low offers on his land, and testified against a claim jumper last month. Any of those could have made enemies, but none seemed worth killing over. "I can't be certain," he admitted, catching up to her as they reached level ground. "But I've been refusing to sell my property to a railroad agent. They want to run a line through my best grazing land. Men kill for land." Paloma stopped at a small spring hidden among the rocks, kneeling to cup water in her hands. She drank and then gestured for him to do the same. They kill for water. They kill for pride and for gold and for things that do not matter. Henry knelt beside her, close enough now to catch the scent of sage and wood smoke from her clothes. He drank the cool water gratefully, realizing how parched he'd become. "Where were you headed when you saw those men?" "Nowhere particular. I move where I need to be." She stood, wiping her hands on her skirt. "I have a camp about 3 miles from here. You can wait there until dark, then circle around to reach town safely." "I'd be obliged." Henry rose as well, aware of her height matching his own 5'9" frame. She was tall for a woman, and moved with a physical confidence he found compelling. "Though I hate putting you to trouble. It is no trouble to keep a man alive who should be alive." Paloma started walking southeast, keeping to the shadows of the larger rock formations. "Besides, I would know why the railroad wants your land so desperately." As they walked, Henry found himself talking more freely than he usually did with strangers. He told her about his ranch, inherited from an uncle who died childless 5 years ago. He'd been 23 then, working as a ranch hand in Texas, with no prospects and few skills beyond breaking horses and mending fence. The inheritance had seemed like providence, a chance to build something of his own. "The land isn't particularly good for cattle," he explained as they navigated a wash carved by long-ago floods. "Rocky soil, sparse grass in summer. But there's water year-round from an underground spring, and the canyon provides shelter in winter. I've built it up slowly, learned as I went. It's not much, but it's mine. And now someone wants to take it." Paloma's voice carried understanding. "My people know this story well." The simple statement held layers of history and pain. Henry knew the Apache had been fighting for their land and way of life for decades, pushed onto reservations, hunted by the army. That Paloma walked free suggested she'd escaped that fate somehow, but he didn't pry. Some wounds were too deep for casual conversation. "I won't give it up without a fight," he said. "But I'm one man. The railroad has lawyers, money, and apparently hired guns. Money and guns do not win every battle." Paloma led him through a narrow gap between 2 towering rocks, emerging into a hidden canyon where a small shelter stood beneath an overhanging cliff. It was a simple structure of wood and canvas, nearly invisible against the stone backdrop. Patience and wisdom matter too. Her camp showed signs of frequent use but temporary occupation. A fire pit with stones arranged for cooking, blankets rolled and stored above the ground to avoid snakes and scorpions, water bags hanging in the shade. Everything was organized and practical, the dwelling of someone who knew how to survive alone. Paloma gestured for him to sit on a flat rock while she gathered kindling for a fire. "You are hungry. I have some jerked beef in my saddle bag." Henry paused, realizing his horse was still tied back on the main trail where he'd left it, "which is about 2 miles from here. Your horse is safe. It wandered into the rocks after you. I will retrieve it before dark." She arranged the kindling with expert precision, then pulled out a match to light it. "I have rabbit from this morning. We will share." As the fire crackled to life, Henry watched her work, fascinated by her economy of movement. She prepared the rabbit with a knife that looked handmade, the handle wrapped in leather. She didn't chatter or fill the silence with meaningless words, but the quiet between them felt comfortable rather than awkward. "How long have you been living out here?" he asked. 2 years, maybe 3. Time moves differently when you are alone." She skewered the meat on green sticks and positioned them over the flames. "I left the reservation at San Carlos. They said I was too wild, too resistant to their ways. They wanted me to forget my mother's people, to become something I am not. Henry heard the steel in her voice, the fierce independence that wouldn't be bent or broken. And your father's family, dead or gone? My father was killed by Apache raiders when I was young, before they knew my mother was Apache too. She took me back to her people, but she never recovered from his loss. She died when I was 16. Paloma stared into the fire, her face revealing the grief she carried. I have been alone since then, except for brief times with other Apache who have left the reservation. That's a hard way to live. It is the only way I can live and still be myself. She met his eyes across the fire. Your way is hard too, building something from nothing, fighting to keep it against those with more power. Why do you not simply sell and start somewhere else? Henry considered the question seriously. Because starting over means admitting defeat. Because I've put 5 years of my life into that ranch, buried an uncle there, weathered 2 droughts and a winter that killed half my herd. Because sometimes you have to stand for something, even when it would be easier to walk away. Paloma smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her face from pretty to beautiful. You understand then, about fighting for what matters. I'm beginning to. Henry accepted the portion of rabbit she offered him, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, an awareness that had nothing to do with the heat of the day. Thank you for the food, and for saving my life. You have thanked me 3 times now. Once is sufficient among friends. She bit into her own portion, her white teeth tearing the meat with practical efficiency. Are we friends? Henry asked, genuinely curious. We are 2 people sharing a fire and food. What else would we be? But her eyes held a teasing light, suggesting she felt the same strange connection he did. They ate in companionable silence as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Henry found himself studying Paloma when he thought she wasn't looking, noting the graceful line of her neck, the strength in her hands, the way her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings with practiced awareness. She caught him watching and raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? That you're remarkable, he answered honestly, that I've never met anyone quite like you. You have met few Apache women, I think. I've met few women, period, who could track armed men, survive alone in the desert, and still show kindness to a stranger. Henry set aside his empty skewer. Apache or otherwise. Paloma looked away, but he saw the faint color rise in her cheeks. Pretty words from a cowboy. Do you speak this way to all women you meet? Only the ones who save my life. He grinned. And for the record, I don't meet many of those. She laughed then, a sound like water over stones, clear and genuine. You have humor. This is good. Life is too hard without laughter. As dusk gathered in the canyon, Paloma rose and disappeared into the rocks, returning 30 minutes later leading Henry's bay gelding. The horse nickered softly, recognizing his master, and Henry stood to take the reins, impressed once again by her tracking skills. He was grazing in a small valley, quite content, Paloma reported. No sign of Morrison's men returning. Thank you. Henry rubbed the horse's nose, checking that the saddle and gear remained secure. I should head for town now, under cover of darkness. Not the direct route. Paloma moved to his side, pointing northwest. Go around the mesa, follow the dry riverbed until you see the 3 tall rocks. Then cut east. It adds 2 hours to your journey, but you will avoid the places where men might wait. You've thought this through. I think through everything. It is how I survive. She looked up at him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. Be careful in Jerome Junction. Cal Morrison works for someone, and that someone will not give up simply because one attempt failed. I'll watch my back. Henry hesitated, reluctant to leave despite the pressing need to reach town. "Will you be here if I come back this way? Perhaps. I move frequently." Paloma stepped back, creating distance between them. But the desert is large and paths cross when they are meant to cross. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but Henry understood her wariness. She lived outside the bounds of normal society, neither fully Apache nor fully accepted by the settlers who viewed her people as enemies. Trust would not come easily. "If you ever need anything," he said, swinging into the saddle, "my ranch is 15 miles west of town. Anyone in Jerome Junction can give you directions. You'd be welcome there, Paloma." She said nothing, but inclined her head in acknowledgement. Henry turned his horse toward the route she'd indicated, then paused for one last look. She stood silhouetted against the dying light, a solitary figure of strength and beauty, and something in his chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't quite name. The ride to Jerome Junction took 3 hours through rough country, but Paloma's route proved sound. Henry saw no sign of Morrison or his men, and rode into town well after dark, the main street quiet except for the saloons and the hotel. He stabled his horse, paid for grain and a rub-down, then made his way to the Golden Eagle Hotel, where he kept a room for his monthly trips to town. The desk clerk, a nervous man named Petey, looked up as Henry entered. "Mr. Dalton, we'd heard you might not make it. There were men asking after you earlier." "What kind of men?" Henry kept his voice casual, but his hand drifted toward his gun. "The rough kind. Said they had business with you, but they didn't look like ranchers or merchants." Petey lowered his voice. "One of them was Cal Morrison. I recognized him from the wanted posters." "He say what he wanted?" "No, sir. Just asked when you usually arrived in town and where you stayed." "I told them I didn't keep track of guest schedules." Petey pushed a key across the desk. "Your regular room is ready, and Mr. Dalton, you might want to keep your door locked tonight." Henry took the key, considering his options. "Morrison's still in town. Last I saw, he was drinking at the Silver Star. That was about an hour ago." "Good to know. Thanks, Petey." Henry climbed the stairs to the second floor, his boots echoing in the empty hallway. His room was at the end, overlooking the back alley rather than the main street. He'd chosen it for the privacy, but now appreciated the extra security of having only one approach. Inside, he lit the lamp and checked the window, making sure it was locked. Then he pulled a chair to the corner where he could watch both the door and window, and settled in to wait. Sleep seemed unlikely with assassins in town, so he used the time to think through his situation. Someone wanted his land badly enough to hire killers. The railroad was the obvious suspect, given their persistent offers and increasing pressure over the past year. But railroad companies usually relied on lawyers and legal intimidation, not bullets. That suggested either a rogue agent acting outside company policy, or someone else entirely who disguised their interest behind the railroad's public offers. Henry's thoughts kept drifting back to Paloma, to the way she'd moved with such certainty through the desert, the intelligence in her eyes, the unexpected warmth of her smile. He'd known her less than a day, yet something about her called to him with an intensity that defied logic. Maybe it was gratitude for saving his life. Maybe it was admiration for her strength and independence. Or maybe it was something deeper, a recognition that occurred when two compatible souls met unexpectedly. He dozed fitfully in the chair as the night hours crawled past, jerking awake at every sound in the hallway. Morning light was seeping around the window curtains when heavy footsteps approached his door, followed by a knock that rattled the frame. "Mr. Dalton, this is Sheriff Wade. Need to speak with you." Henry recognized the voice of Jerome Junction's longtime lawman. He unlocked the door to find Sheriff Thomas Wade standing there, his weathered face grim beneath his gray mustache. "Morning, Sheriff. You're up early. Found Cal Morrison dead in an alley about an hour ago. Shot through the heart at close range." Wade's sharp blue eyes studied Henry's face. "You know anything about that? I've been in this room all night." Henry gestured to the chair by the window. "Is there a problem?" "Only that Morrison was asking after you yesterday and now he's dead. Some might see a connection." Wade stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Henry made a quick decision to trust the sheriff, who'd always struck him as honest and fair. He told the story of the ambush attempt, leaving out only Paloma's identity and location. He described her simply as a woman who'd warned him of danger, figuring the less attention drawn to her, the better. Wade listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "This woman just appeared out of nowhere and saved you, more or less. I got the impression she'd been tracking Morrison and his men, maybe heard them planning the ambush. And you believed her, trusted her enough to hide in the rocks while armed men rode past." "I did." Henry met the sheriff's eyes steadily. "She had no reason to help me, but she did. I owe her my life." "Well, someone else decided Morrison needed killing. Could be his partners turned on him, or could be whoever hired him decided to eliminate witnesses." Wade moved to the window, peering down at the alley below. "Either way, this whole thing smells bad. You watch yourself, Henry, and if you see this mysterious woman again, tell her I'd like to hear her version of events. If I see her, I'll mention it." Henry stood, stretching muscles stiff from a night in the chair. "I've got a meeting at the bank this morning. After that, I'm heading back to the ranch. Might be safer here in town where I can keep an eye on you. Might be, but I've got cattle to tend and a ranch to run. Can't hide forever." Henry retrieved his hat from the bedpost. "Besides, seems like trouble found me in town just fine." Wade nodded reluctantly. "Can't argue that, just be careful. And Henry, if anything else happens, you send word immediately. This has gone from harassment to murder, and I won't have that in my territory." The sheriff left, and Henry washed up before heading to the bank. His meeting with Horace Finch, the bank manager, went better than expected. Finch agreed to extend the loan another year, citing Henry's steady payment history and improving herd numbers. But as Henry was leaving, Finch called him back. "One more thing, Mr. Dalton. A gentleman from the Arizona Central Railroad was in here last week, asking about your property. Wanted to know the loan amount and your financial situation. You tell him, of course not. Banking business is confidential." Finch polished his spectacles, a nervous habit, but he was quite insistent, even suggested the bank might benefit from encouraging you to sell. "I declined his suggestion, naturally, but I thought you should know." "I appreciate that, Mr. Finch." Henry shook the banker's hand. "Seems like the railroad is awfully interested in my particular piece of land. Indeed, makes me wonder what they know that we don't." Henry pondered that as he collected his horse and headed out of town, taking Paloma's route in reverse. What made his land so valuable? The railroad's proposed route would cut through his property, but there were other paths they could take with minimal adjustment. Why fixate on his ranch specifically? He was still mulling over the question when he sensed movement in the rocks above the trail. His hand went to his gun, but a familiar voice called out, "Peace, Henry Dalton. It is only me." Paloma emerged from the shadows, and Henry's heart lifted absurdly at the sight of her. She carried a rifle now and looked like she'd been traveling hard. "I was hoping to find you," she said, approaching his horse without fear. "I have information." Henry dismounted, leading the gelding to a patch of shade. "What kind of information?" "After you left last night, I tracked Morrison's men. They made camp about 5 miles from here, and I listened to their talk." Paloma's eyes were serious. Morrison was hired by a man named Victor Strauss. He owns the general store in Jerome Junction, but his real business is buying property for development. He represents several investors from back east. Strauss. Henry knew the man slightly, a portly fellow who'd been in Jerome Junction about 3 years. Why would a store owner care about my ranch? There is copper on your land. A large deposit, according to the geological survey Strauss commissioned last year. Paloma pulled a folded paper from inside her shirt. I took this from Morrison's saddle bag after he died. Henry took the paper, scanning what appeared to be an official survey document. You were there when he was killed. I killed him. Paloma said it without drama or pride, simply stating a fact. He was planning to try again today to catch you leaving town. I could not allow that. Henry looked up from the document, meeting her steady gaze. You killed a man to protect me. I killed a man who needed killing. That he threatened you simply made the choice clearer. She touched the rifle at her side. I am not troubled by it if that concerns you. Morrison was a murderer many times over. It doesn't concern me so much as humble me. Henry stepped closer to her. Paloma, you barely know me. Why risk yourself this way? She was quiet for a long moment, and he saw something vulnerable flicker in her eyes before she looked away. Perhaps I am tired of being alone. Perhaps I see in you someone worth protecting. Or perhaps the wind told me we are meant to walk the same path for a time. She met his gaze again. Does the reason matter? No, Henry said softly. No, I suppose it doesn't. He wanted to touch her, to take her hand or brush the strand of dark hair that had escaped her braid. But he sensed she would spook like a wild horse if he moved too quickly. Instead, he held up the survey document. According to this, there's enough copper on my land to justify a major mining operation. That would explain why Strauss is so determined. Henry folded the paper, thinking hard. The question is what to do about it. You could sell, take the money and start elsewhere. Paloma didn't sound like she believed he would, but offered the option anyway. Or I could file my own mining claim and develop it myself, or partner with someone honest who knows the mining business. Henry looked at her. What would you do? I would burn the survey and tell no one of the copper. I would live my life as before and let the land keep its secrets. Paloma shrugged. But I am not you. You have built something, made commitments. My way is not yours. Your way has kept you alive and free, Henry pointed out. That's worth something. They stood in the dappled shade, two people from different worlds, bound together by circumstance and something neither could quite name. Finally, Paloma broke the silence. Come, I will show you something. She led him on foot deeper into the canyon country, moving with that effortless grace that made it look easy. Henry followed, leading his horse over increasingly rough terrain. After about 40 minutes, they emerged onto a plateau overlooking a vast sweep of desert and mountains, the view breathtaking in its harsh beauty. I come here to think, Paloma said, sitting on a flat rock near the edge. Here, the world seems larger than any one person's problems. Henry sat beside her, conscious of the warmth of her body in the cool morning air. It's beautiful, and you're right, it gives perspective. Tell me what you truly want, Henry Dalton. She turned to look at him directly. Not what you think you should want, but what your heart desires. No one had ever asked him that question so directly. Henry thought about his ranch, about the years of hard work and harder winters, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. But when he opened his mouth, different words came out. I want to stop being alone. I want to share my life with someone who understands what it costs to fight for what matters. I want to wake up next to someone who doesn't need me to be anything other than what I am. He paused, feeling heat rise in his face. And in the past day, I've started wanting all of that with you. Paloma's expression didn't change, but he saw her hands tighten slightly on the rock beneath them. "You do not know me. I know you're brave and resourceful. I know you live by your own code and answer to no one. I know you saved my life twice now, and I know I've never felt this way about anyone before." Henry took a chance and covered her hand with his. "Tell me I'm alone in feeling this, and I'll never mention it again." She didn't pull away from his touch, but neither did she move closer. "I feel it too," she admitted quietly. "From the moment I saw you on that trail, something told me you were important. I have learned to trust those feelings even when they frighten me." "Does this frighten you?" "Yes, because caring for someone gives them power to hurt you. Because my life is not easy and joining it would make yours harder. Because we come from different worlds that do not mix well." Paloma turned her hand under his, lacing their fingers together. "But perhaps I am tired of being afraid. Perhaps it is time to risk something for something greater." Henry felt his heart hammering as he leaned closer, giving her time to retreat if she wished. She didn't move away, and when his lips met hers, the kiss was soft and tentative, a question more than a demand. She answered by kissing him back, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest. They broke apart after a moment, both breathing harder. Paloma touched her fingers to her lips, looking surprised. "I have been kissed before," she said. "But never like that, never like it mattered." "It matters," Henry assured her. "You matter, Paloma, more than copper or land or anything else." She studied his face as if committing it to memory. "Then we must make sure you survive to keep your ranch, because if we are to have any future, we need a place to build it." They spent the next hour formulating a plan. Paloma knew the location of Strauss's office and had observed his patterns. He typically worked late several nights a week, alone in the building after his store clerks went home. That would provide an opportunity for Henry to confront him directly, to make it clear that further attacks would not be tolerated. "It is dangerous," Paloma warned. "He may be armed or have guards nearby, less dangerous than waiting for the next ambush." Henry stood, helping her to her feet, "And I'll have an advantage he won't expect." "What advantage?" "You." Henry squeezed her hand. "If you're willing to watch my back again." Paloma smiled, fierce and bright. "Always." They returned to collect Henry's horse, then made their way to a spot near Jerome Junction where Paloma had a secondary camp. Henry marveled at her preparedness, the way she'd created multiple refuges throughout the territory, each stocked with basic supplies. "I learned early that having options means staying alive," she explained, showing him a cache of dried food and ammunition hidden in a crevice. "Never depend on any one place or person, except now you're depending on me." Henry caught her around the waist, pulling her close. "How does that feel?" "Strange, good, terrifying." She tilted her face up to his. "Kiss me again so I remember why I am being so foolish." He obliged gladly, and this kiss was deeper, more urgent. Paloma melted against him, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally separated, both were flushed and breathing hard. "We should wait until dark to approach town," Paloma said, her voice slightly unsteady. "That gives us several hours." "How should we pass the time?" Henry asked, though his body was suggesting several ideas his mind knew were premature. "Talk to me. Tell me about your family, your life before the ranch. I want to know who you are, Henry Dalton." They settled in the shade of the camp, sharing water and the last of the rabbit from yesterday. Henry told her about growing up in Texas, the son of a farmer who'd lost everything to drought and debt. His mother had died when he was young, his father when Henry was 17, leaving him to make his own way. He'd worked as a cowhand, a trail driver, even a brief stint as a deputy in a small town before his uncle's inheritance changed everything. "I never expected to amount to much," he admitted. The ranch was a gift I didn't deserve, but I was determined to make it work, to prove I could build something lasting. Paloma listened intently, occasionally asking questions but mostly just absorbing his story. When he finished, she shared more of her own past. Her mother had been a skilled healer, teaching Paloma the ways of plants and traditional medicine. Her father had been a gentle man who loved her mother desperately, trying to bridge two cultures that often stood at odds. They were happy together, despite everything, Paloma said. That gave me hope that such things are possible, but their happiness was cut short by violence, as so much is in this land. We could make something different, Henry suggested. Something that lasts, perhaps. Paloma leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of trust that moved him deeply. First, we must survive the next few days. As dusk approached, they prepared for the confrontation with Strauss. Henry checked his gun, making sure it was loaded and ready. Paloma moved through the camp with efficient purpose, gathering her rifle and a knife she strapped to her leg beneath her skirt. "You have done this before," Henry observed, "prepared for violence." "I have survived for years alone. Sometimes that requires fighting." She met his eyes. "Does that trouble you?" "No, it makes me admire you even more." Henry touched her face gently. "But I'd like to reach a point where you don't have to fight alone anymore. We will see what tonight brings." They rode into Jerome Junction after full dark, leaving the horse at a livery on the edge of town. Paloma moved through the shadows like a ghost, with Henry following as quietly as his boots allowed. She led him through back alleys and empty lots, avoiding the main streets where they might be recognized. Strauss's store stood dark on a side street, but a light showed in the upper window where his office was located. Paloma pointed to the external staircase that led directly to that second-floor space. "I will position myself across the street where I can see anyone approaching. If there is trouble, I will create a distraction." She pressed something into his hand, a small whistle. "If you need help, blow this." "I will come." Henry pocketed the whistle, then pulled her close for a quick, hard kiss. "Be careful. You also." She disappeared into the darkness, and within seconds, Henry couldn't see her anymore despite knowing roughly where she'd gone. He climbed the external stairs slowly, testing each step for creaks. At the top, he could see through the window into Strauss's office. The store owner sat at his desk, reviewing papers by lamplight, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. He looked ordinary and harmless, not like a man who'd hired killers. Henry tried the door and found it unlocked. He slipped inside, drawing his gun as Strauss looked up with a start. "Mr. Dalton, what is the meaning of this?" Strauss half rose from his chair, his face going pale. "Sit down." Henry kept the gun steady. "We need to talk about Cal Morrison and your interest in my ranch." "I don't know what you're talking about." But Strauss's eyes flicked toward a drawer in his desk, a tell that suggested a weapon nearby. "Don't." Henry moved closer, kicking the desk drawer shut. "Morrison's dead, and I have the survey showing the copper deposit on my land. I know you've been trying to buy me out, and when I refused, you hired men to kill me. That's a serious accusation without proof." Strauss's initial fear was giving way to calculation. "You have no witnesses, no evidence. It's your word against mine, and I'm a respected businessman in this town. I have Morrison's partners. The sheriff can make them talk. Those drifters. They'll deny everything or disappear. You have nothing." Strauss leaned back in his chair, relaxing slightly. "Be reasonable, Dalton. I'm prepared to offer you $15,000 for your ranch. That's more than fair for property that was worthless when you inherited it. It's worth 10 times that with the copper deposit, and we both know it." Henry kept the gun trained on Strauss. "I'm not selling, and if anything else happens to me, I've left evidence with people who'll make sure you hang for murder." It was a bluff, but Strauss couldn't know that. The store owner's face hardened, showing the ruthless man beneath the jovial exterior. "You're making a mistake. My investors have significant resources and no patience for obstruction. One way or another, they'll get that land. They can try." Henry moved toward the door, backing away while keeping Strauss in sight. "But I promise you, any more attempts on my life will bring consequences you won't like." He was almost to the door when it burst open behind him, and two men rushed in, guns drawn. Henry spun, but one of them clubbed him across the side of the head with a pistol barrel. Pain exploded through his skull and he went down hard, his own gun clattering across the floor. "Idiots," Strauss hissed. "I told you to wait outside. He was threatening you, boss. We heard it." The larger of the two men, a brute with a scarred face, kept his gun pointed at Henry. "What do you want us to do with him?" Henry's vision swam, blood trickling down his face from the gash in his scalp. He tried to stand, but the room tilted dangerously. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Strauss speaking. "Take him out to the old mine shaft east of town. Make it look like an accident, a fall maybe, or a cave-in." Strauss stood, straightening his vest. "And this time make sure the body won't be found." The two men hauled Henry to his feet, and he fought against them weakly, still dazed from the blow. They were dragging him toward the door when a gunshot shattered the window, and the lamp on Strauss's desk exploded in a spray of oil and glass. The room plunged into darkness as fire spread across the desk. In the confusion, Henry heard the door slam open and Paloma's voice, cold and deadly. "Let him go." More gunshots, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness. Henry felt his captors release him as they returned fire. He dropped to the floor, rolling toward where he'd seen his gun fall. His hand closed on the grip just as the larger man loomed over him. Henry fired upward, the shot taking the man in the chest. The brute fell backward with a crash. The second man was struggling with someone in the darkness, and Henry heard Paloma's fierce cry as metal clashed against metal. "Get out," she shouted. "The building is burning." Henry stumbled to his feet, head still spinning. He could see her now in the growing firelight, locked in combat with Strauss's second guard. She'd lost her rifle but had her knife out, using it with deadly efficiency. As Henry watched, she ducked under the man's wild swing and drove the blade up under his ribs. He collapsed with a gurgling cry. Strauss was frantically trying to beat out the flames consuming his desk and spreading to the walls. Paloma grabbed Henry's arm. "Move. Now." They burst out onto the external staircase as smoke billowed from the office behind them. Henry's legs felt unsteady, and Paloma half carried him down the steps. They just reached the ground when the office window exploded outward, flames shooting into the night sky. People were emerging from nearby buildings, shouting about the fire. In the chaos, Paloma pulled Henry into an alley and kept moving, putting distance between them and the burning building. They reached their horse at the livery, and she somehow got him into the saddle before swinging up behind him. "Can you ride?" she asked, her arms around his waist to steady him. "I think so. Head hurts." Henry was aware of blood soaking his collar, his vision still doubled. "I know a place. Hold on." Paloma took the reins and urged the horse forward, heading out of town at a cautious trot that wouldn't attract attention. They rode for perhaps an hour before she turned off the main trail, following paths only she could see in the darkness. Finally, they reached a small adobe structure tucked into a canyon, abandoned but still sound. Paloma helped him dismount, supporting his weight as she got him inside. She'd obviously used this shelter before because there were supplies already there, including blankets and a small store of medical equipment. She got him settled on a pallet, then lit a candle to examine his head wound by its flickering light. "You are fortunate. The cut is not deep, but you will have a substantial headache." Her fingers were gentle as she cleaned the wound with water from her canteen. "You may have a concussion. Worth it to see you burst through that door like an avenging angel." Henry managed a weak smile. "You saved me again. And you killed a man to defend yourself. We are even." Paloma wrapped a strip of clean cloth around his head, binding the wound. "You should rest. No sleeping for several hours, though. I need to make sure you are not seriously injured. Stay with me." Henry caught her hand. "Please." "I will stay." She settled beside him on the pallet, and he rested his head on her shoulder, breathing in the scent of sage and smoke and something uniquely her. "I love you," he murmured, the words surprising even himself. "I know it's too soon, and I'm probably saying it because I'm injured and not thinking clearly, but it's true. I love you, Paloma." She was quiet for a long moment, her hand stroking his hair gently. "I love you too," she finally whispered. "Though I swore I would never let myself feel this way about anyone." "Why not?" "Because love makes you vulnerable. Because everyone I have loved has been taken from me." Her voice caught slightly. "But perhaps some risks are worth taking." They sat together in the candlelight, two damaged souls who'd found unexpected solace in each other. Henry's head throbbed, but the pain was distant compared to the warmth of having Paloma beside him, her heartbeat steady against his cheek. "What happens now?" he asked. "Strauss might have died in that fire, but his partners will still want the copper. Then we must be smarter and stronger than they are." Paloma shifted so she could see his face. "And we must do it together." Over the next few hours, as Paloma monitored him for signs of serious head injury, they planned their next moves. The fire would have destroyed much of Strauss's records, but copies likely existed elsewhere. Henry needed to file his own mining claim immediately, establishing legal ownership of the mineral rights before Strauss's investors could move. "I will go back to Jerome Junction tomorrow and file the claim," Henry said. "It's risky but necessary. Not alone." Paloma's tone brooked no argument. "Where you go, I go. We are partners now in all things." "Partners." Henry liked the sound of that. "Does that mean you'll stay at the ranch, make it our home instead of just mine, if you want me there?" "I want you everywhere. In my home, in my life, in my bed." He pulled her closer, ignoring the spike of pain the movement caused. "Marry me, Paloma." She drew back slightly, searching his face. "You have known me 3 days. I've known you long enough to be certain, long enough to trust you with my life and my heart." Henry touched her cheek. "I'm not asking you to answer now. Think about it. But know that I'm serious. I want to build a future with you." Paloma leaned in and kissed him, tender and sweet. "Ask me again when your head is not bleeding and we will see what answer I give." He smiled against her lips. "I'll hold you to that." They talked through the night, Paloma keeping him awake as she'd promised. They spoke of dreams and fears, of the lives they'd lived and the life they might build together. As dawn painted the sky outside their shelter, Henry felt more certain than ever that he'd found something rare and precious. "I should check if the wound has stopped bleeding," Paloma said, carefully unwrapping the makeshift bandage. She examined his scalp, her fingers light and skilled. "It is healing well. You are fortunate to have such a hard head. My father used to say the same thing." Henry caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Thank you for taking care of me. You would do the same for me." She rewrapped the bandage, then stood and stretched. "We should eat something, then decide our next move." They shared a simple breakfast of dried meat and hardtack from Paloma's supplies, washed down with water from a nearby spring. Henry's head still ached, but his vision had cleared and the dizziness had passed. He felt well enough to ride, which was good because they couldn't hide indefinitely. "I have been thinking," Paloma said as they prepared to leave, "about your proposal." Henry's heart kicked up. And I think you should court me properly before we speak of marriage. Take me to dinner, perhaps. Show me what it would be like to live as a normal woman, not a fugitive hiding in the desert. She smiled at his expression. But you should know that my answer will likely be yes. You have already claimed my heart, Henry Dalton. Now you must prove you can care for it properly. I'll prove it every day for the rest of our lives, he promised, pulling her into his arms. Starting now. They rode back toward Jerome Junction slowly, taking their time and watching for any sign of trouble. The town was in an uproar when they arrived. People gathered around the burned-out shell of Strauss's store. Sheriff Wade stood in the street, directing men who were sifting through the debris. Henry and Paloma approached cautiously, drawing curious stares from the townspeople. Wade looked up and his expression hardened when he saw them. "Mr. Dalton, I need to speak with you about last night's fire." "I'll be happy to tell you everything, Sheriff." Henry dismounted, helping Paloma down. "But first, is Strauss dead?" "No, though 2 of his men are." Strauss himself escaped with minor burns. He's at the doctor's office now, claiming you attacked him and set the fire deliberately. "That's a lie." Henry kept his voice steady. "Strauss hired those men to kill me because I wouldn't sell my ranch. I went there to confront him and his guards attacked me. The fire was an accident in the fighting." "Do you have any proof of these accusations?" "I do." Paloma stepped forward, and Henry saw Wade's eyes widen slightly at her appearance. "I was there. I saw everything." "And you are?" "Paloma Pasqual. I am the woman who killed Cal Morrison in defense of Henry's life." She held Wade's gaze without flinching. "I will testify to everything if necessary." Wade studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'd like to hear your full statement, Miss Pasqual." "Mr. Dalton, you'll need to come too. And you should know that Strauss has already hired a lawyer from Prescott. This is going to get complicated." The next several days were indeed complicated. Strauss pressed charges of assault and arson against Henry, while Henry Counter filed charges of attempted murder and conspiracy. The whole town took sides, with many supporting Henry, whose reputation for honest dealing was well established, while others sided with Strauss, who had money and influence. Through it all, Paloma stayed by Henry's side, her presence drawing both curiosity and some hostility from townspeople, unused to seeing an Apache woman moving freely among them. Henry made it clear to anyone who asked that Paloma was under his protection, and anyone who disrespected her would answer to him. "You are making enemies for my sake," Paloma observed one evening as they sat in Henry's hotel room, reviewing papers related to the legal proceedings. "Good. Shows people where I stand." Henry looked up from a deposition. "Does it bother you the way some of them look at you? I have seen such looks my entire life. They cannot hurt me." But she touched the cross at her throat, a gesture he'd come to recognize as self-comfort. "What bothers me is bringing trouble to you. You're not trouble. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Henry set aside the papers and moved to sit beside her on the bed. "I mean that, Paloma. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions, working hard but living alone. You've given me a reason to fight for the future." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "You have changed my life too, given me hope that I could have more than survival, that I could have love and partnership and a real home. You can have all of that." Henry tilted her face up to his. "With me, for as long as you'll have me." Their kiss deepened, and Henry felt the familiar fire kindle between them. They'd been circumspect so far, sharing kisses and embraces but going no further. Partly because of Henry's injury, partly because they were staying in a hotel where privacy was limited. But now, with Paloma soft and willing in his arms, restraint became difficult. "We should wait," Paloma murmured against his lips, though she made no move to pull away. "Until we are properly married." "Is that a yes to my proposal?" Henry asked, his heart hammering. "It is a yes to courting, to seeing if we can truly build a life together." She smiled, her eyes warm. "But I think we both know where this is leading." A knock at the door interrupted them. Henry reluctantly released Paloma and went to answer it, finding Sheriff Wade in the hallway. "Sorry to disturb you, but I thought you should know. Strauss withdrew all charges against you about an hour ago. His lawyer filed the paperwork and they both left town on the evening stage." Henry blinked in surprise. "Just like that? Why?" "Near as I can figure, someone higher up in his organization decided to cut their losses. Strauss had become a liability, what with dead bodies piling up and the fire drawing attention." Wade pulled out a cigar, rolling it between his fingers. "You're in the clear legally, but I'd still watch my back. Those investors might try a different approach. I'll be careful, and Sheriff, thank you for believing us. I believe in the truth, wherever it leads." Miss Pasqual's testimony was convincing, and frankly, Strauss never passed the smell test with me. Wade tipped his hat. "You two take care, and congratulations, by the way. Town's already gossiping that you're courting. Nice to see something good come out of all this mess." After Wade left, Henry turned to find Paloma standing by the window, looking out at the darkening street. "We are free of Strauss," she said softly. "But the sheriff is right. This is not over. Then we'll face whatever comes together." Henry joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Tomorrow, I'll file that mining claim. After that, we'll go to my ranch and start figuring out what comes next." "Your ranch?" Paloma turned in his embrace. "You keep calling it yours. But if we are to be partners, it should be ours." "Ours," Henry agreed, liking how the word sounded. "Our ranch, our land, our future." They left Jerome Junction the next morning after Henry successfully filed his mining claim. The ride to the ranch took most of the day, following rough trails through spectacular desert country. Paloma rode behind him on the horse, her arms around his waist, and Henry found himself imagining this same ride repeated countless times over the years to come. The ranch appeared as they crested a final rise, a modest spread of buildings clustered near a stand of cottonwood trees that marked the spring. The main house was small but solidly built, with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hillsides, grazing peacefully. "It is beautiful," Paloma said quietly. "I can see why you fight to keep it. It's home." Henry helped her dismount, then stood holding her hand as they looked over the property together. "Or it will be once you put your mark on it." They settled into a routine over the following weeks. Henry worked the ranch, mending fences and tending cattle, while Paloma explored the land and began making the house truly livable. She had a gift for creating comfort from simple things, hanging herbs to dry, arranging stones, and found objects into pleasing patterns, bringing life and warmth to spaces that had been purely functional. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. Henry taught Paloma to read better, as her education had been scattered and incomplete. She taught him about plants and tracking, about reading weather and understanding animal behavior. "You are a good teacher," Henry observed one night as she pointed out constellations in the clear desert sky. "Patient and thorough. My mother taught me the same way." She believed knowledge was the most important gift you could give someone. Paloma lowered her arm, turning to look at him. "I wish you could have known her. She would have liked you, and your father. He would have worried I was making the same mistake he did, loving someone from a different world." Paloma's smile was sad. "But he would have seen that you are a good man, and that would have mattered most." Henry pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. "I promise to honor their memory by honoring you, by building the kind of life they would have wanted for you. You already do that every day. She kissed his cheek. I am happier than I ever thought possible, Henry. You have given me that. As weeks turned to months, they began to discuss the future more concretely. The copper deposit represented potential wealth, but developing it would require expertise and capital they didn't have. Several mining companies had approached Henry with partnership offers, and he and Paloma carefully evaluated each one. This one seems most honest, Paloma said, reviewing a proposal from a firm out of San Francisco. They offer fair terms and promise to minimize disruption to the ranch operations. They also have a good reputation for treating workers well, Henry added. That matters if we're going to have miners on our land. They ultimately signed with that company, negotiating an agreement that gave Henry and Paloma a substantial percentage of the profits while leaving day-to-day mining operations to the experts. The first payment arrived 3 months later, a sum that made Henry's eyes widen. We are wealthy, Paloma said, staring at the bank draft. What do we do with this? Invest some, save some, use some to improve the ranch. Henry set the draft aside, taking her hands. But first, we use some of it to plan a proper wedding, because I'm done waiting, Paloma. I want you as my wife, legally and publicly. I want everyone to know you're mine and I'm yours. Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Then ask me properly, Henry Dalton. He dropped to one knee right there in their kitchen, holding both her hands. Paloma Pasqual, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and partner for the rest of our lives? Will you build a family with me and grow old by my side? Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Yes forever. They married on a perfect October day in 1884, with half of Jerome Junction in attendance, and a few of Paloma's Apache friends who traveled from the reservation to witness the ceremony. Sheriff Wade gave Paloma away, having become something of a friend and protector to them both. The local priest performed the service, carefully incorporating both Catholic and Apache traditions to honor Paloma's heritage. Henry had never seen anything more beautiful than Paloma in her wedding dress, a simple white gown adorned with turquoise and silver jewelry. She wore her hair long and loose, a wreath of desert flowers crowning her head. When she smiled at him during the vows, his heart felt too large for his chest. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing and food and toasts to the happy couple. But eventually, Henry and Paloma slipped away to the house he'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. He'd added a room, enlarged the windows, built furniture with his own hands. He wanted everything perfect for their first night as husband and wife. It is beautiful, Paloma said, looking around the bedroom with its new bed and pretty curtains. You did all this for me, for us. Henry came up behind her, helping her remove the wreath from her hair. Everything I do now is for us. She turned in his arms, and the love in her eyes took his breath away. Make me your wife in truth, Henry. I have waited long enough. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a claiming and a giving all at once. Henry had been with women before, but never like this, never with his heart so completely engaged. Paloma met him with equal fire and sweetness, and when they finally lay sated in each other's arms, Henry felt peace settle deep in his soul. I love you, he whispered against her hair. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone. And I love you. Paloma traced patterns on his chest with her fingers. Thank you for not giving up on us, for fighting through all the obstacles to reach this moment. There will be more obstacles, Henry acknowledged. More people who don't approve, more challenges to face. But we will face them together. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. That makes all the difference. Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. The mining operation on their land proved profitable, providing steady income that allowed them to improve the ranch and build a more comfortable life. Henry hired a few hands to help with the cattle, good men who respected Paloma and didn't cause trouble. Paloma thrived in her new role, moving between her Apache traditions and settler life with increasing confidence. She became known in Jerome Junction as a skilled healer, using her knowledge of herbs and medicine to help those in need. Some people still looked askance at the Apache woman who'd married a white rancher, but most came to respect her for her kindness and competence. In the spring of 1885, Paloma discovered she was pregnant. Henry's joy was matched only by his anxiety, terrified something would go wrong. But Paloma remained healthy and strong throughout her pregnancy, continuing to work and ride until the final weeks. Their son was born on a cool November evening, arriving quickly and without complications. Henry held the squalling infant with trembling hands, awed by the tiny perfect features and surprising strength of his son's grip. "What should we name him?" Paloma asked, exhausted but radiant. "I was thinking Thomas, after the sheriff who helped us. Or something from your mother's people, if you prefer." Henry carefully returned the baby to her arms, watching as their son immediately quieted at his mother's touch. "Thomas is good, but give him an Apache name too so he knows both sides of his heritage." Paloma kissed the baby's forehead. "Thomas Kuruk Dalton. Kuruk means bear in Apache. May he be as strong and brave as a bear." "Thomas Kuruk Dalton," Henry repeated, testing how it sounded. "Perfect. He's perfect and you're perfect and I'm the luckiest man alive." The years that followed brought both joys and sorrows. They lost a second baby, a daughter who came too early and lived only hours. The grief nearly broke them both, but they clung to each other and to Thomas, finding strength in their family and their love. 2 years later, Paloma gave birth to healthy twin girls, both strong and loud and demanding. They named them Maria and Rosa, and suddenly the house that had once felt too big seemed barely large enough for their growing family. The copper mine continued to produce, making the Dalton family quite wealthy by local standards. But Henry and Paloma lived simply, investing most of their profits back into the community. They funded a school in Jerome Junction, making sure it welcomed children of all backgrounds. They helped struggling ranchers and families, remembering their own hard times. Sheriff Wade retired in 1890, and on his recommendation, Henry was appointed the new sheriff. It was work he'd never considered, but Paloma encouraged him to accept. "You have a good heart and a strong sense of justice," she said. "You will serve the people well." As sheriff, Henry worked to bridge the divide between settlers and the Apache, using Paloma's connections and understanding to build trust on both sides. It wasn't always easy, and there were those who resented his efforts. But slowly, grudgingly, attitudes began to shift. Through it all, Henry and Paloma's love deepened and grew. They still sat on the porch each evening when weather permitted, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They still kissed like newlyweds and held hands like young lovers. The passion between them never dimmed, tempered and strengthened by the years they'd spent building a life together. On their 10th anniversary, Henry took Paloma back to the place where they'd first kissed, the plateau overlooking the desert. They stood hand in hand, watching the same spectacular view, but everything else had changed. "You ever regret it?" Henry asked. "Giving up your freedom for domestic life?" "I gave up loneliness for love," Paloma corrected him. "I traded survival for living. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." She turned to face him, still beautiful, though silver now threaded through her dark hair. "You gave me a home, Henry, not just a house, but a place where I belong, where I am accepted and valued for exactly who I am. You gave me the same." Henry pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "And you gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than I was. We gave those things to each other. She kissed him softly. That is what love does. It makes two incomplete people into one whole life. They stood together as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. Two souls who'd found each other against all odds and built something lasting. Below them, the ranch spread out peaceful and prosperous, smoke rising from the chimney where their children waited. Beyond that, the copper mine hummed with activity, providing jobs and prosperity to the whole region. But in that moment, none of it mattered as much as the woman in Henry's arms and the love they shared. Everything else, all their success and wealth, was just a bonus. The real treasure was this, the everyday miracle of choosing each other again and again. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they made their way back down the trail toward home. Paloma rode in front of Henry this time, his arms around her waist just like that first day, but everything was different now. Then they'd been strangers bound by circumstance and growing attraction. Now they were partners, lovers, parents, best friends. The lights of their ranch house glowed warm and welcoming as they approached. Through the window, they could see Thomas helping his younger sisters with something at the kitchen table. He was 10 now, serious and responsible beyond his years, showing signs of inheriting both his father's steady nature and his mother's quiet strength. The twins, Maria and Rosa, were 7 and absolutely inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. They had Paloma's dark eyes and Henry's smile and already showed signs of the same fierce independence their mother possessed. "Our family," Paloma said softly as they dismounted. "Our beautiful family. Thanks to you." Henry kissed her temple. "You warned me of danger that first day, and I trusted you completely. Best decision I ever made." "I fell in love with you within a day of meeting you," Paloma admitted. "I fought it, thought I was being foolish, but my heart knew what my mind refused to accept." "What was that?" "That you were my home, that wherever you were, I belonged." She took his hand, leading him toward the house. "Come, our children are waiting, and Maria promised to tell us about the baby birds she found today." They walked into the warmth and light of their home, into the cheerful chaos of family life. Thomas looked up from helping his sisters and smiled, that gap-toothed grin that reminded Henry so much of his own childhood photographs. "Papa, Mama, look what we made." Rosa held up a drawing, colorful and chaotic. "It is our family," Maria explained. "See, there is Papa with his sheriff star and Mama with her medicine bag and Thomas with his books, and us with the chickens we are supposed to be feeding but sometimes forget." Henry and Paloma laughed together, examining the drawing with appropriate seriousness. Later, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, they sat together on the porch one last time, wrapped in a blanket against the cool night air. "Tell me," Paloma said, "if you could go back to that day on the trail, knowing everything that would happen, would you change anything?" Henry thought about the question seriously. The ambush, the danger, the fire and the fighting, the legal troubles and the suspicious townspeople. The hard work of building a life together, the grief of losing a child, the constant challenges they'd faced. "Not one single thing," he said firmly. "Every moment, good and bad, led us here. To this life, this family, this love. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Neither would I." Paloma nestled closer to him, her head on his shoulder. "You know what I remember most about that first day?" "What?" "The way you looked at me when I told you about the danger ahead. You didn't question or doubt. You just trusted me completely, even though you had no reason to." She tilted her face up to his. "That moment changed everything, because I realized you saw me as an equal, someone worth believing in. You were worth believing in, you still are." Henry kissed her, long and slow and sweet. "Every single day you proved that my trust was well placed." And every day you prove that my love was well given." Paloma settled back against him with a contented sigh. "We are fortunate, Henry. So many people search their whole lives for what we found." "We found each other," Henry corrected. "Or maybe we were meant to find each other all along. Fate, destiny, divine providence, whatever you want to call it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. Closer to the house, their cattle settled for the night with soft, lowing sounds. And inside, their children slept safe and warm, dreaming whatever dreams children dream. This was their life now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and rich and deeply satisfying. They'd built it together from nothing. Two people from different worlds who'd refused to let those differences divide them. Instead, they'd woven their cultures, their strengths, and their love into something entirely new. "I should tell the children the story someday," Paloma mused. "About how we met, how you trusted me and I saved you and we fell in love." "Make sure you tell them the whole truth," Henry said. "About the violence and the danger and the hard choices, but also about the love that made it all worthwhile. I will tell them about a cowboy who was brave enough to trust an Apache woman when the world said he should not, and about a woman who was brave enough to love him back." Paloma smiled. "It is a good story, our story. The best story." Henry stood, pulling her up with him. "And it's not over yet. We have years ahead of us still, more chapters to write together." They went inside, banking the fire and checking on the children one last time before retiring to their own room. As Henry held Paloma close in the darkness, listening to her breathing slow into sleep, he sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the twisting path that had led him to her. 10 years ago, he'd been a lonely rancher fighting to save his property, with no idea his life was about to transform completely. 10 years ago, he'd trusted an Apache woman who warned him of danger, and that trust had changed everything. It had saved his life, opened his heart, and given him a future richer than he'd ever imagined possible. And the best part, they were just getting started. Their children would grow, bringing new joys and challenges. The ranch and mine would continue to prosper, allowing them to help even more people. They'd grow old together, accumulating memories and grandchildren and a lifetime of shared experiences. But through it all, the foundation would remain the same, the bedrock truth that had sustained them through every trial. They loved each other completely, trusted each other endlessly, and chose each other again every single day. Henry drifted off to sleep with Paloma warm in his arms, a smile on his face and peace in his heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to prove their love and strengthen their bond. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Their story had started with danger and trust, with an Apache woman's warning and a cowboy's faith. It had grown into something neither of them could have predicted, a love that transcended cultural boundaries and societal expectations. And it would continue, unfolding day by day, year by year, each moment another thread woven into the rich tapestry of their shared life. The Wild West that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving had become their home, the place where they'd planted roots deep enough to weather any storm. And whatever the future held, whatever trials or triumphs awaited them, Henry and Paloma would face it together, hand in hand and heart to heart, just as they always had, just as they always would.